Morning, everybody. This program is called a 10-Minute Talk, and it's sponsored by the Cumberland County Historical Society. And my talk today is on Madam Bessie Jones, my newest book and my first attempt at history. I am the writer of the Carlisle crime cases. You may be familiar with those: Dying for Vengeance, Courting Doubt and Darkness, Darkness at First Light, How the Dying Fall, and finally Things Strangled. So that means there are 5 of them. And before that, I wrote a coming-of-age book called Glory in the Flower under my maiden name, Jody McGibney. So my college friends would be able to identify with the name and also the contents of the book. But to talk about Bessie, Madam Bessie Jones, so I chose that letter M so I could talk about Bessie and my research and what I learned about her. And it was totally an accident. It wasn't my idea. I was at the 2018 Carlisle Expo, and a man walked up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Nate Davis, and you are writing about crime in Carlisle?" And I said, "Yes, I have Carlisle crime cases. They're police procedurals. They're about a crime that actually happened in Carlisle, but then I fictionalized the characters. But with Bessie, Madam Bessie Jones, which is right behind me, the book cover, is a little different. He handed me, he asked me, he said, "Are you going to do Bessie Jones?" And I said, "No." I mean, it hadn't occurred to me. And he said, "Well, I have some information here, and then if I give to you, will you tell me that you will write about Bessie Jones?" And I said, "Well, could I see what you have first?" Because you never know. So he laid a stack of papers, maybe 2 inches thick, and they were the 1860 census for Bessie Jones, for her mother Cora Andrews, the 1900 census, the 1914 draft information for Bessie's husband. And so he handed it all to me, and I said, "Well, this is a good start." He said, "So you'll do it?" I said, "Yes, I'll do it." And so about a year, I was working on Things Strangled at the time, and I tend to only work on one project at a time. So I said, I will get to it next year. But as it turns out, I started the research that weekend. And about a year into the research, I became comfortable with Bessie, because I didn't know who she was. I'm from Cincinnati. We moved here in 1975. The more research I did, and the more questions arose, and the more contradictions I found. But after I researched about a year, I became comfortable enough with Bessie. And for me, she has emerged from history, a shadowy history, into a person that you can pick up the book and read in flesh and blood. I've tried to get by all the sensational information about Bessie runs a brothel, and I thought, oh yeah, I've heard that. And then other people go, and I said, well, no, there's a lot more to Bessie than running a brothel. My whole aim in writing this book is to find out, well, mainly for myself, but for other people too who are interested, and there are many in this area, because Carlisle is saturated in history, are interested in Madam Bessie Jones. And so, but I couldn't get an angle. It took me a long time. I was maybe 18 months into doing the rough draft and researching all along, and then plugging it back, into the rough draft. And it wasn't until I remembered Langston Hughes's poem, Mother to Son, that I finally found an angle into Bessie Jones. I wanted to put it in the book, but there were some copyright issues, so since this is a teachable moment, I hope, I'm going to share it with you. It's called Mother to Son. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I've been climbing, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn your back. Don't sit down on the steps, 'cause you'll find it kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's going on, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me, it ain't been no crystal stair. Langston Hughes. And so that poem gave me the impetus or the angle into finally writing Bessie Jones, and that was work. Can you imagine the work involved? That she took over the business from her mother in approximately 1922, when her mother wanted to retire, but her mother still stayed to help with the cooking and the girls. But Bessie took over the running of the business. And so she made some changes, I think that were very appropriate, and I think also belies some of the criticism that she received from the male population back in the 20s and 30s about running a brothel. And of course, a lot of women were concerned too that maybe their husbands might be running over to the bawdy house to pay their paycheck, their Friday night paycheck, and give it away, so to speak, to one of the prostitutes. But my aim then was to take all these pieces that I was finding out of research, and I did research databanks, newspapers.com, personal interviews, court records, just any type of research that I could think of. I kept doing it. Oh, and besides that, there are like 40-some Bessie Jones. So I had to weed through a lot of articles that weren't about Bessie, but surprisingly enough, there were articles about Bessie Jones from New York newspapers, starting in actually 1918 with Cora's arrest, up through out through Mark Twain's newspaper in the West. And I was surprised that she had that much coverage. But also my intention was not just to show the work involved, but also show, and given the research that I found, it was true, it was verified, I could verify, that she helped her community, that she handed out money to people in need in the community, and she donated much of her income to good causes like the Scouts, well, what the feds didn't take for back taxes. But that's part of the story too. And so I found out that those are the things that interest me, and I was hoping that those were the things that would interest other people. But I want to read you just the front page of the prologue, just to see, if you might be interested in picking up the book and taking a look and finding out about Carlisle's Madame Bessie Jones. March 1959. Don't look! Don't look! Don't look! Ordered the owner of the Carlisle Hardware as he turned his two daughters, 5 and 15, away from the window and shepherded them to the back of the store. Get your satchels. It's time for school. They looked and had seen 2 prostitutes, one redhead and one blonde, swinging hat boxes and waiting for the bus stop for the ride to Harrisburg. Painted with eye makeup and rouge, one had high heels and pedal pushers despite the frigid March weather. The other one tugged at her black skirt, looking up and down the street for the bus. Glad to be shut of that place. That's a dump, said the redhead. You're not saying that because we got busted and jailed? Nah, boy, I bet that was a first for you. The younger woman nodded. That was scary. Gotta say, though, I've been in worse places. At least we're not talking about the streets. I feel safe at Bessie's. We have a real bed, good food, and a clean house, even if it's a bit shabby. We're making her money, so she could afford to spruce up the place. She's keeping a low profile. I I ain't got any complaints. She pays for our physicals, the younger one said, and buys all our supplies and new lingerie and sponges and vinegar and condoms. And that is page 1 of the prologue, in which I hope you will pick up the book. Anywhere books are sold, Sunbury Press, Amazon, local bookstores. And I do want to give you my website. It's www.carlislecrimecases.com, and that will tell you about my police procedurals. And then Facebook / Carlisle Crime Cases by J.M. West. And that's concludes my talk for the day. But I hope also that if you do like the book, that you will give me a review on Amazon. Thanks so much for joining us.